Okay. You'll just look at me and we'll just talk. So, tell me your name and when were you born?
My name is Ricky Washington Sr. I was born 1951 in Pineville, Kentucky, Bell County.
Hmm.
Um,
So you're from Pineville.
I'm from Pineville.
You're the first person I've talked to from Pineville today. Tell me a little bit about growing up in Pineville. Where, what was that like?
Uh, it was good and bad. We didn't have everything that we needed, that we wanted really, but we had everything we needed. We never ever went hungry. We didn't do without because we had our own cows and chickens and pigs and those things. And we raised my parents raised all our food, and and in the wintertime they canned all their stuff that they grew in the gardens and stuff, and and they killed their livestock. Like for meat, we had smokehouses. They did, and they salt cured the meats and stuff, and we had meat all during the winter months.
So there's always food.
Always food. We were poor, but we weren't poor. We didn't have a lot of money, but we had the necessities to get by, and to live.
What were some other families you remember in Pineville?
We had, back then there was a lot of what we called African Americans and blacks, and they were spread out all over the county. I lived in Dorton Branch, it was called, and we had about 6 families up in there. We had, the Smiths, Crockett's, the Whites, and 2 or 3 more families that lived up in there that we socialized with, and we all played together and did those sort of things that kids do at my age at that time. When I went to school, I had to walk a mile to get to school, and a mile back every day. We didn't have buses then.
So you went to school in Pineville.
I went to school in Pineville.
So what was the name of that school?
My first 3 or 4 months I went to Roland Hayes, the black school that we had down there. And I can remember that we didn't have that many students at that time because the students, we had a lot of students that they bused from Pineville to Barberville to another black school in Barberville, Roland Hayes. But the school, I went to, Roland Hayes, Rosenwald was in Barberville. They bused them to Rosenwald in Barberville. But Roland Hayes High School that we had in Pineville, we had, 30 or 40 black kids. The last teacher that I can remember at Roland Hayes was Dr. Carmen. I can remember him specifically.
What sticks out in your mind about him?
Well, he was a good instructor, and he was a good motivator, and he would always make sure that you were always taught correctly and you were never mistreated. Everybody down there was treated equally. We didn't have back what you call now bullies and people to tush hog you around. They didn't know. That was just unacceptable.
Do you remember any families from up at Straight Creek?
I remember the Jeffersons, the Fergusons, the Whitesides, the Renfros, and there was a whole lot of others, that had moved away from there, after the '77 flood.
What was that?
Well, that was just a devastating flood that we had back in 1977, where we got more inches of rain in a short period of time than we've ever got in the history that I've been down there. Been through a lot of floods, but not like the 1977 flood, because in the 77 flood we had moved from where we lived out in the county to the city. Okay, my grandmother had bought our first home in the city, and we really didn't know how to act. We had running water, electricity, and all that stuff. But the 77 flood really was devastating for us because it got 14 feet in our house, you know, and so we had to move, and, you know, we had lost all our stuff that, you know, that we had gotten, you know, through our lifetime.
Tell me a little bit about your parents. Who were they and what did they do for a living?
My parents, my dad left in '58, and he went to Milwaukee to work with the longshoremen up there on the boats and stuff that came in up there. And my mother, she was just like a caretaker. You know, she would like wash clothes and iron clothes and do housework and everything, you know, for what we call the rich and high and mighty. You know, that was just stuff that, you know, that we heard and everything. But that's what my mother did. Because most of the African Americans then, they didn't have the jobs and stuff that like some of us have today. We had, you know, a lot of them worked. I worked on the railroad and stuff, and I never did. None of our family worked on the railroad, you know.
So, what was your mom's maiden name?
My mom's maiden name was Cloud. You know, I didn't. Her mother was a steward. Okay, and the stewards owned a lot of what you call coal mining property. They owned a lot of assets, and she came from Alabama. My grandmother did. I remember, you know how you overhear elderlies talking and stuff. So she was a steward, and she had married Joe Cloud. You know, that was her husband. Okay, and Joe Cloud, I think to me, he was a white man, but he looked black. You know, and he was the first person in our family to work at the Pineville Community Hospital back then, whenever it was up and running. And he took care of us. You know, we called him Doc Cloud. You know, yeah, that was his name.
Was he from over in Claiborne County?
No, he wasn't from that bunch in Claiborne County, but he came from Danville,
Kentucky.
Kentucky.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And your grandma came from Alabama.
Alabama.
Stewart.
She was a steward.
What about your? Do you know much about your dad's folks?
I didn't know that much about my dad's folks because I didn't really get to know him personally until when I got out of the Air Force. I went to Milwaukee where he lived, you know, because I had an uncle up there, and I went up there and looked him up and introduced myself to him and everything. But he knew who I was through my Uncle Joe, because him and Uncle Joe left and went up there in 1958 and stuff, and he remarried up in Milwaukee, because I remember meeting. I had 3 half sisters up there I'd never met in my life, and you know, they knew who I was and they accepted me, you know, and stuff.
Did you stay in contact with them after that much?
I do. We message and, you know, do telephone conversations, and you know, we're all real close, you know.
So you get out of high school.
Okay.
So you went to y'all started busing to Rosenwald. Is that what happened?
Okay, from Roland Hayes, I went to Pineville City Schools.
Okay.
We integrated 1958.
Okay.
I was in the first black class to go to Pineville High School, Pineville City Schools. There was, I think, 8 of us.
Okay, so that's a story. So tell me about how was that integration process in Pineville?
Well, it went really well because once we integrated to the Pineville City Schools, we didn't have to walk a mile. We had to walk 3/4 of a mile from home and stuff. But the Pineville City Schools was really good because, you know, we had good teachers. I remember Miss Britton, she was my first grade teacher. And she always, well, okay, all the black kids, we sit in a row. I mean, on the left side of the wall, you know. I can remember it specifically. All the white kids sat on the right side. But we were all taught equally, you know. And she always made sure that we got our work done, and our home, we didn't have homework back in the first grade, you know, and stuff like that. But when we came to school, she always made sure that we completed our work and stuff before, you know, we got to go out of school. My grade school years at Pineville were really good because of the fact that we were never abused verbally, physically, you know, that I can remember, you know. I never did get no fights, and a lot of people don't believe that and stuff, but we had a good educational system down at Pineville High School.
Do you think that the size of Pineville helped with that kind of relationship between each other, that being a smaller community, people knew each other more, and so was less prone to act out? Or what do you think made that environment?
Well, I think that environment brought us closer together because of the fact that the people in Pineville, they were good people, you know, not because, you know, they were white or black, but everybody, you know, talked to everybody. We all got along together, you know, we played together, we went to school together, and we learned together, you know. I can't remember people using the N-word and stuff like that, you know, but if they did use it, you know, I was never around, you know, that clique or whatever it was back then that hung together, you know.
Yeah.
Because, you know, like I say, we all played together, you know, the blacks and the whites.
Yeah.
And they all accepted that, you know, we were a tight-knit community and stuff. You know, it was a good place to grow up in.
Yeah.
You know.
How old were you when you went to when you joined the Air Force?
When I just got out of high school, I turned 18. Okay, I went to Lackland Air Force Base. It was November of '70, and I'd done my basic training in the Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas, and I graduated through basic end of January. Okay, at the end of January, I got my first assignment, you know, when I was shipped off to Seattle, McCord Air Force Base. Okay, and I stayed out in McCord about a year. And from McCord, you know, I got my orders, you know, to go to Southeast Asia, to go to Vietnam. Okay, this was around 1971. Okay, and I stayed over there in Southeast Asia probably 12 to 15 months. You know, it was rough, but Uncle Sam sent us over there, but I know that God brought me home, you know, and I was thankful for that. You know, I've seen a lot of bad stuff, and is stuff that you can't ever get out of your mind, because if you watch TV and watch war stories and stuff, it brings it back to your remembrance. Because I had a lot of friends to get killed, and but that was part of it.
Yeah.
I adjusted to that,
Yeah.
But I stayed in the Air Force. My term, about 6 years. And then after that, I went into this Kentucky National Guard over here in Middlesboro. And I stayed in there about 10 years. It was Army. It's a lot different than Air Force. For me, it was a big adjustment, and then during those years I was in National Guard, I went back to college, and I got my little associate's degree, and which that was something I wanted to do to further my education.
Where'd you get your associates from?
Southeast Community College here in Middlesboro. Mr. Cox out there, he was my English teacher.
Okay.
And we were really tight, because he had to ask me a lot of questions too about Roland Hayes too, because our goal, we were trying to get pictures of Roland Hayes, and I'm still working on that, because I got 2 or 3 other people that I know that's got materials, but I just can't get them to give it up. But eventually they'll have to give it up, because they're good people, but anymore they don't trust people. The trust is not there like it used to be. Because like I say, when I was little, we never did lock our doors or windows or nothing. Because we felt safe, and back then we were safe. Because we didn't have the problems going on today back then like we do today.
Do you remember any social activities from high school, and did you play any sports or anything like that?
I lettered in football 5 years, from the 8th grade. I lettered in track 4 years. I played basketball 4 years. I lettered in basketball 4 years. And I got the Junior Athletic Cup my junior year, because that was the most prestigious award in high school that you can receive, as an athlete. And
so you played a little bit.
I played a little bit, a whole lot, let me tell you, and stuff. And to further that up, I got a football scholarship to Eastern at that time, but I chose to go do my service, prior to that. So I passed that up going to Eastern Kentucky University up in Richmond, and went in the Air Force instead.
What was the big rivalries in sports?
Gosh. Well, we didn't have big rivalries when I was playing football. I'm gonna tell you why. Because we beat everybody so bad. The 4 years or 5 years that I played football, we lost 3 games. We never lost to Bell County. I can go to my grave and say that. And Bell County dominates everybody up here now. I never lost to Corbin. And ain't too many around here say that, but I can. Lynch, they never would play us. They won the state championship about.
They wouldn't play y'all?
They wouldn't play us, because they knew they were going to be in for a beating.
Okay.
But we couldn't. We got in state playoffs a couple of years, and we got beat out one game. I can remember we lost to Dayton, Kentucky, 20-19. But Lynch would not play us, and back then they had a system called the Dickerson system, and that would choose what high school got to go into playoffs. And Lynch would win every year by that Dickerson system on the point scale they used.
Oh, okay. Did y'all play any Tennessee teams?
No, no, we weren't allowed back then. Uh, but we played some good teams. We really had good teams, and see, we had 60 to 65 kids on football team back then, and we could like two platoon, and like kids today, they struggle to have enough to play. But we had powerhouse team. I can remember, everybody on our team was just really, really good.
Did y'all ever have any trouble going up to Corbin?
Yes, we did. At that time back then, it was really hard on African Americans because they thought we weren't good enough to like eat in their facilities, and after football games and stuff, whenever we played down there basketball, they would have to bring our food out the back door to us black kids. And we didn't really know or think that was right or wrong because it was an acceptable practice back then. That's just like the water fountains, you got colored, you got white. And it's like the movie theaters that we went to back then. Okay, the black sat up in the top and the white sat down in the bottom, and I remember experiencing those things, but I never did let those things bother me, because I said, well, we have to go on and we have to keep stepping, and we did, and we overcome all those obstacles. We got a lot of obstacles today, but it's just a matter of time before all that is brought together and equalized, because we have come a really long way, and I know that things will get better because the Bible speaks that things always get worse, but things will get better, and they're starting to get better.
So you get out of the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
Do you come back home or do you wander around for a little bit?
Well, when I got out of the Air Force, I had all this money and had a new car and stuff. I was married, and when I was overseas, my wife, she ran around on me and done this and that, and it sort of hurt my feelings, and I was depressed, but I still moved on. We got divorced, and we had 4 kids. Okay, and 2 of my kids, one of them went in the Marines, and I begged him not to go, and he got killed.
Oh.
I had to bury him. And then I had another son to overdose, on drugs. I had to bury him. And that's the hardest thing that I had to do was bury 2 of my sons, because I knew that I should have passed away before that they did, but my mother's death wasn't as tragic as the death of my 2 sons.
Because she had lived a full life.
Because she had lived a full life and stuff, and she was a single mother, and she always took care of us. But after that, the Air Force and stuff, I got divorced, like I had said, and I went out and, like any other young male, went out and ran women from town to town. That was just a thing to do. And I met a young lady down in Clay County in Manchester, and she was the most beautiful thing down there, and so I got to claim her. And we've been together 45 years. We've got a girl and a boy.
What's her name?
Betty Sue Henson.
She's a Henson.
She's a Henson.
And what are your kids' names?
Tyrone and Tracy. And they both live in Lexington. My daughter, she graduated from UK because she went up there before my son did, and so my son finally went up there. he works at Edith J. Hayes Elementary School. My daughter, she works at Kroger's. She's in retail. She goes store to store to do inventories and things like that. She really likes it because she ain't in one place all the time, you know.
There seems to be a relationship. You're not the first person I've talked to that there seems to be a relationship between Middlesboro and Manchester.
Mm-hmm.
Is that because of proximity or?
Because this sounds crazy, but see, like in Pineville, Millsboro, okay, say most of the females were kin to us, so we couldn't court them, you know. Mm-hmm. So we had to go out of town, you know, and run around, you know, like men do. Mm-hmm. And Manchester had all the pretty girls.
Oh, okay. Okay, so that's the relationship.
I'm not saying that, but they did. You know, Millsboro had pretty girls too. Now Pineville, I was kin to all of them. So you know, so I went to Manchester and everything, and met this little beautiful girl down there, and you know, we've been together 45 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So tell me about church. What church did you go to church growing up? And what was the name of that church?
We went to the Methodist church. Mm-hmm. We had a black Methodist church in Pineville. I was little, but I remember it very well because it sat behind Roland Hayes High School. We went to that church, I think, up until 1977. That's when the flood came in and destroyed that church. Mm. But it didn't get up to Roland Hayes High School and do as much damage as it done to other places. So after we left the Methodist church, we went up to Bethel Baptist Church, which was another black church in town, because you know we had quite a few African Americans in back then. So we started going to the Baptist church, Bethel Baptist, and I've been up there since. About 7 years ago, I left Bethel Baptist Church. We had a preacher, Reverend Cornett. He was a really good preacher. And then we had our elders in our church, which, you know, were older women and men. And over time, you know, they were old and they passed away. Okay, so I was the only senior deacon left down there. And after our other elders or women passed away, we had a generation of young non-believers that came down there and joined the church. They were already in the church, but they were young and they had grew up. So they wanted another pastor, so they, in a Baptist church, you know, the majority rules on voting, so they voted this pastor out. And this pastor had not done nothing wrong, to my knowledge, because I always was there. And we would go visit the sick, and we'd take our communion kits with us, and we'd serve them communion like was customary practice. Mm-hmm. But in the end, the church didn't do well, and they had to shut the doors to the church. And to this day, the church doors are still closed.
But the building's still there.
But the building's still there. Mm-hmm. And they've got a historical marker down there, I believe. Mm-hmm. And that's a good church. It's a good church building. And there's a lot of people that has came to me and that wanted to reopen the church, but the ones that voted the pastor out, somehow they went and got power of attorney, so they have to make the decisions on what to do with the church building. And according to the Constitution at that time, that's incorrect, because you know we had so many members in that church, you know, and they got a voice too, you know, but a lot of them, like I say, have moved away, and then a lot of them still sends money you know, a lot of our members that's still able, they send money to the First State Bank down in Pineville, you know, to try to get the church doors back open and that church back running. But after they had voted Reverend Cornett out, I resigned. I sent him my letter of resignation as the senior deacon down there. And after that, for about 6 months to a year, I, you know, felt really sad and I felt bad because of what had happened at Bethel Baptist Church. And then there was an elder from First Christian Church approached me coming out of Walgreens one day, and he said, Rick, he said, are you going to church anywhere? I said, well, no, not right now. He said, well, why don't you come worship with us? And I said, well, Billy, let me think about it. And so 2 weeks after that, I went down to First Christian Church in Pineville. First African American ever been in that building.
Oh, really?
Yes. And I'm still in that church now. I've progressed from an elder to from a deacon to an elder, and I'm the first African American that has ever been in that pulpit in Pineville to this day. You know, and they're good people down there, and a lot of them I went to high school with and grew up with, and they accepted me, and I still go there today.
That's your home church.
That's my home church right now, is First Christian Church.
What about where your parents? Well, and maybe you don't know about your dad, but or maybe you do. But where are your parents buried at?
Well, my mom is buried in Walls End Cemetery in Pineville. And see, what that curtails was, you know, they won't let no blacks get buried in the cemetery in Pineville, you know, the memorial cemetery that they've got up by the hospital. I don't know if y'all seen it or not. But anyway,
Still today they won't?
Still today they will not yield, and they've got their own committee that decides and determines that who gets buried up there. I remember Inez Bishop, she petitioned them and we petitioned them and stuff to have her buried up there, and they just wouldn't do it. Their cemetery committee is biased. I'm 100% sure they're biased, and they don't want no African Americans buried up there. And so what I'm in the process of doing is trying to appeal to them, you know, to change that. And that's one of our biggest obstacles that we have, is our places of burial. And I think that everybody should have a right and privilege to be buried where they choose, you know, and they should be. But I was talking about, you were asking me about where my mom's buried, and she's buried in a black cemetery in Walls End, okay? And
is that WALLS?
SEND.
Okay, Walls End.
Walls End Cemetery. It's in Pineville, but it's in a little community called Walls End. And in Walls End, you know, they used to have a lot of African Americans that lived there because they worked in the coal camps in that area. My grandmother, all my people before me are buried up there. Okay. Now my two sons that I had talked to you about earlier, now I had to bury them in Barberville, you know, because one of their aunts ran a cemetery in Barberville, and she let us bury them down there for nothing. There's a lot of African Americans buried down there, you know, in that cemetery.
Do you know the name of that cemetery where they're at?
Cannon Creek.
Cannon Creek.
Cannon Creek. And it's real nice. The lady, Ellick Ray Little, that she passed away, but she had left a lot of money in that endowment to have that cemetery took care of for years to come. And it's one of the nicest cemeteries that you can go to, because you know.
So, let's see. So, do you live in Middlesboro now?
No, I live in Pineville now.
Still live in
I
Pineville?
still live in Pineville. But I have a lot of affiliation over in Middlesboro, you know. But we had a Black Veterans Association, and then they shut it down. But I belong to the Tri-State Vietnam Veterans over here in Middlesboro now. We continued on, you know, and we got our own group over here. And
Is there, do y'all go, where's the closest VA for you? Is it
the
Johnson's?
closest VA for me, I've always went to Lexington, you know, out on Leestown Road. I've been going up there ever since, you know, I got out of service. I used to go to Johnson City over there in Tennessee, you know, but to me, Johnson City was always too far, and you never could find a parking place over Johnson City. It was horrible. So
That's where she lives at, is Johnson
oh, is
City.
that where you live at? Okay.
It's a long ride.
So it's a long ride, yeah. But I've got good care over there in Johnson City. I really have.
Do you know of any groups, clubs or anything? Did you see any of the people in Pineville? Did they have any, like, was the Masons there, or the Eastern Star, or any kind of civic club, or did the women have a quilting club or anything like that that you
Well,
remember?
I can remember back before my time, they had a Black Masonic organization in Pineville, and they met in the courthouse down there. And they allowed them to meet in the courthouse basement. Okay. The Eastern Stars, which were the women, they had an organization also. So, and they met, you know, in the basement of the courthouse. And me, as I got older, I joined the Masons in Barberville, you know, Tri-County number 174. And they had a whole big lot of Black Masons. They had their own building. It was really nice. They built a brand new building. And I went down there for years, you know, and after all their elders down there passed away, we had to close that building too, you know. And right now I'm inactive as a Mason, but I've had other Masonic lodges that has asked me to come and join, you know. And I failed to do that because I've got too many things right now on me to do that. Like another guy here, Sam Coleman, you know, his dad was the district deputy grand master of 14 Masonic lodges here in eastern Kentucky. Okay, and I always went with him everywhere he went. So before he passed away, he nominated me to be the next district deputy grand master here in the Mountain District. Okay, and I was elected through the Grand Lodge in Louisville. And I still hold that title today, but I still can't get our young Black Masons to come together to keep it going. You know, they just seem like they're not interested in historical things like that. I don't know what's wrong with them.
So, but the building in Barberville's still there.
It's still there.
Wow.
And what we did, we let Thankful Baptist Church in Barberville use that building to keep it from getting ran down and everything, but they paid the utilities and everything on that building. But anytime we want that building back, you know, we just got to go in there and tell them.
Do you remember the 8th of August? Did y'all do the 8th of August in Pineville?
8th of August.
It's like Emancipation Day, like Juneteenth, but some places did it and some places didn't.
No, we
but-
didn't. We had a group to come to Middlesboro,
Mhm.
you know, and we participated in that one over here
Uh-huh.
because we didn't have nothing in Pineville for Juneteenth.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay.
Because we have a hard time in Pineville getting what African Americans we got down there to even go to church at all.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I don't know what's, you know, there's things of the world that attracts them more than eternal life with Jesus Christ, you know. And the world just shows them so much, they're just blinded, you know, to those things.
So they'd rather do something else.
They'd
than
rather
come
do something
together.
else and come together and unite and do something positive, you know, for the African Americans, you know. But there's enough of them down there, if they would come together, they could accomplish a lot. But they just don't want to do nothing.
Yeah.
It's not, you know, and there's a lot of them down there that's got really good jobs, believe me, you know, and they make really good money. The drug problem with our blacks in Pineville is nothing compared to what it is over here in Middlesboro. Yeah, I don't know what, it's different day and night for some reason, you know, I don't know why. But, you know, like I say, I live in Pineville, I know all the blacks, and we might have one or two that, you know, like smokes weed or whatever they do, you know. But the rest of them, you know, they're clean living. And they, you know, like I say, they got good jobs and good homes. I can't understand that, you know.
Tell me a little bit about, just kind of give me kind of a laundry list. What are some of the family names that are still in Pineville? Some of the last names?
Some of the last names down there is Washington. I'm a Washington. Okay, I still got family down there. And the Clouds, which was my mother's family, there's a lot of them down there. Okay, and you got the Fergusons, you got the Jeffersons, you got the Hills, and I forgot to mention them. They were a lot of them, you know. One works at the water company, and one, you know, works for the health department. One's a school teacher. You know, they've done really well, you know. But those are the people that we've got left in Pineville right now. You know, I know I'm probably forgetting some of them, but still I've hit on, you know, the majority of the top names down there.
Is there anything that I've missed that you want to make sure people understand about Pineville or your life in Eastern Kentucky? Or
Well, in closing and everything, I want unity. We've got justice in Pineville, but we don't have the justice that we deserve. We don't have problems down there with the police, you know, because the police knows everybody, and they know the ones that gets into mischief, and they know the ones that don't get into mischief down there. But the things that I want to see change in Pineville are the bad things that's going on down there turns into good. Because we've got a lot of people in Pineville that they've got these little cliques, and if you're not in those cliques and stuff, you know, they've got a line drawn that they don't want you to cross, or they won't allow you to cross. You know, we've got, of all the committees we got in the county down there, you know, we've got one black person on one committee in that whole town, and that's incorrect. That shouldn't be, you know. They just started here putting African Americans on the sheriff's department here in the last couple of years, and those two African Americans are from Middlesboro, and I'm glad that they finally, you know, broke the color barrier. You know, getting back to that, I want to say this, that I was the first African American in Pineville to be on the police department down there. Back in 1978, I got a job as the first African American police officer in Pineville under the mayorship of Robert L. Maiden. He come to me and he said, "Rick," he said, "we need a black police officer." He said, "The state is on us, you know." And I said, "Well, Bob," I said, "I'll do it." So I stayed in the police department in Pineville from 1978 to 82, you know, and after that I went to become the police chief up in Cumberland, Kentucky, you know, and I stayed up there a couple of years, and then after that, you know, I got hurt in the National Guard. I broke my back and had some other things, and so I couldn't do police work anymore. But I went on and I worked for Rural Transit Enterprise Corporation out of Mount Vernon, Kentucky. You know, I drove one of their medical transports for 17 years, and I retired last year from them, you know, and, you know, financially, you know, I do real well, you know. Lord supplies all my needs and not my wants, you know. But I've lived a good life, and I know that there's better things that are going to come my way. But right now, you know, we're in a good stage. Like down in Pineville, they're redoing the whole town. You know, we've got new sewer lines, water lines. They're working on the downtown infrastructure. And it's going to be really nice once they get it done. You know, we're supposed to have cobblestone streets, and our present mayor, you know, he's doing really well down there. He's doing a really good job, and I want him to know that, but he probably already knows that. But I'm probably going to stay here and try to see things, you know, through. Because they always come to me for a lot of advice on a lot of stuff, because they know I know everybody, and you know, they know I know how to solve problems. And you know, solving problems is everybody coming together on one accord, you know, doing the right thing. So that's
pretty good.
That's my closing statement.
That's a good closing statement. Let me hit the button here. Well, police chief in Cumberland, huh?
Yes, sir.
How was Cumberland?
It's up in Harlan County.
No, I know where Cumberland is.
Cumberland?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, see, there's a lot of people that didn't know that and stuff, but there's a lot of people that did.
Uh-huh.
You know.
No, I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is this still? Okay, I think. Okay, stop.